Before we get started with this week's video, I just want to let you know that my 2026 calendar is now available, and Jeroen and I have released next year's West and North Iceland workshop. Everything is available via the links down in the description of the video. So in this week's video, we are heading on to the northeastern part of Iceland, an area I haven't photographed for almost 6 years. So safe to say I was excited about what was to come, and oh boy, did this trip deliver. So we are right now on our way to the Mývatn area, and just outside of Akureyri that we are approaching, there's this beautiful mountain range, and Jeroen and I, we just knew that there's some good stuff up there. You can see it here on the drone. Like the first time I tried to photograph this place was all the way back in 2018, but I simply just didn't have a drone that was capable of flying up all the way up there. I do now with the DJI Mavic 4 Pro, and then we can fly all the way up to this spire right there and photograph it up close. And we came in and it was quite like really low clouds, foggy, we weren't sure, but it kind of like looked as if it was clearing. So we just gave it like 5 minutes and boom, it started to clear. And wow, is that just one heck of a subject up there. It looks so epic. So flew the drone up there, loads of panoramas from all sorts of different perspectives, vertical panoramas, classic panoramas, just filling the frame with these beautiful mountains, the fog, background lake, just absolutely fantastic. So we have made it to the amazing Studlagil basalt canyon. Right now I have just been standing down here where there's another person standing right now, and then we have people shooting from up here and into the canyon with a wide angle lens for the most part. This place has changed so much since I made my original video from here all the way back in 2019. The hike in here has been halved. You park right now at Studlagilfoss, the waterfall, and then there's like 2.5 kilometers of hike to get in here. It's still relatively easy to get down here if you are up for a little bit of climbing and a little bit of mud on your boots. It can look quite busy when you arrive at the car park, but most tourists simply just stay up here or at the different platforms that has been installed. The reason why it has become so famous is that there's been a documentary from Iceland with Will Smith, or presented by Will Smith, back in 2021, I think, and I think it was made with National Geographic, where they visited this place. So it has just like exploded since. So there's a lot of people here, but at the very least, when you hike back, you can get a cup of coffee at the little cafe there. Well, hardly a cafe, it's more like a stand. I am so happy with how this photo turned out, and definitely one of my favorites from the entire trip. I actually love it so much I added it to my 2026 calendar. You probably also recognize this place from my post-processing course, where I among others teach you how to edit light, but what I didn't do when I first photographed this place was placing myself in the scene. Admittedly, back then I was a bit too concerned about how slippery those foreground stones covered in red algae are, and yes, they are super slippery. So because of that, back then I did not go into the scene. But I have regretted that for 6 years, so I was determined to make it this time, and to be honest, it wasn't that bad as long as you're just a little bit careful, and having myself in the scene just makes such a big difference in understanding the scale of the canyon. As a part of a major update to my ebooks on composition and landscape photography, I've added both new pages, one of them featuring this photo, and I've added extended EXIF data to all the photos like I have in my ebook on light and landscape photography. This streamlines the ebooks, and I even for the first time ever offer a small discount if you get the bundle. So if you have hesitated to get the ebooks because of a lack of EXIF data, but you want to learn about composition in landscape photography in an easy to understand and straight to the point way, now is your chance. There is a link to the ebooks down in the description of the video. So we have made it here to Dettifoss on the west side, and admittedly it's one of the harder photos to get here in Iceland. What is so important of this specific photo is to just forget everything about the sky and then zoom into the waterfall. It's much more impactful. As a rule of thumb, when I photograph big waterfalls, I also want a fast shutter speed, so you see the curtains of the waterfall falling. If you do a long exposure in a waterfall like Dettifoss, then you kind of lose the sense of scale. What can also add to the sense of scale is, of course, humans. So what I've been waiting for is a guy walking on the other side of the canyon in a yellow raincoat. It's one of the only places that I want yellow raincoats in my photos. What I can sadly also see is that there's actually been shielded off on the other side, so people can't get too close to the waterfall, and that of course limits how I can compose my photos from this side. So what I'm simply doing is I'm cutting off a lot of Dettifoss, a lot of the waterfall, zooming in, making sure that I have this guy walking up in the left side of my photo, and then I try to make Dettifoss take up as much of the photo as possible. As I said, I need a fast shutter speed, which means I also need to pump up the ISO because it's cloudy today, it's later in the day, so we need a fast shutter speed. And I also have a somewhat open aperture, which is not a problem here because Dettifoss is far away from where I'm shooting. So I'm shooting at f7.1 for this photo right here and ISO 3200. After photographing from this angle, some of us went up to another viewpoint. It's a bit further from Dettifoss, but you do get a more straight-on view where you can see more of the waterfall. This area is also under construction as they're extending the boardwalks, and parts of the area is also closed off due to dangers of a landslide. And so it has been for more than half a decade. I'm not sure why they don't just throw a stick of TNT into the crevices and be done with it. At the viewpoint, I played around with both vertical and horizontal photos and different exposures, but I actually did end up preferring a minimalist yet dramatic, zoomed in, fast shutter speed photo. If you're interested, you can see the difference between a fast exposure and a long exposure here. It's not that the long exposure doesn't have an aesthetic quality to it, but you do lose the sense of scale of Dettifoss, and it is, after all, the most powerful waterfall in Europe in terms of the amount of water flowing through it, and one of the largest. So we have come to a canyon called Ásburgi, and it's a place I've actually never photographed before and been to before, but because it's autumn and it's a little bit, this year the autumn colors came a little bit early, so we only have like splashes of yellow left, like here in the background. And that's actually exactly what we are going around photographing right now, because you can get to a place like this and be like, there's not really anything to photograph. But with the long lens on, in my case here, the Tamron 28 to 200 millimeter, haven't got my Sigma just yet. It's simply just about zooming in to these splashes of color and make them stand out. So for these photos, I'm actually specifically opening up my aperture as much as possible, and then I'm blurring everything around it and just use the foreground trees, the background trees to like frame these splashes of color that we see. There's quite a lot of flies right here. But it's quite interesting actually. So it is getting a little bit darker. So if I'm hand holding, there's a little bit of wind, I may need to up the ISO a little bit to get a somewhat faster shutter speed, like 1/50th of a second. But it's easy to hand hold when you have a good IBIS. But yeah, it's simply just a question about walking around and finding all these small splashes of color. So we have now arrived at one of my probably top 2 favorite waterfalls in all of Iceland, Aldeyjarfoss. And we have these beautiful, almost like lenticular clouds going on up here behind us above the waterfall, which is super, super cool. Right now, people are just like dialing in and getting a feeling for what shutter speed they want to photograph the waterfall at before they head out on this small cliff, which is still there after 10 years. I can't believe it's 10 years since I was here the first time, like exactly 10 years since I was here the first time. Crazy. But yeah, so Aldeyjarfoss is really, really cool. Here from the front, you can also walk up here and photograph it from the side. And then there's of course the drone. I have a drone shot that I have posted quite a lot on Instagram that I want to redo, because that drone shot is like, I don't know, cropped from a DJI Mavic 2 Pro, and it's like 4 or 6, maybe even down to 2 megapixels. With a newer drone that can zoom in, I want to recreate a photo that I took all the way back in 2019. This right here is what it's all about, right? And it's for taking photos like this. I am so in love with the telephoto lens on the Mavic series of drones. For this specific photo, I actually made it a vertical panorama with 2 photos because DJI completely dropped the ball on the tilt abilities of the Mavic 4 Pro when it's in vertical mode. In vertical mode, you basically can't tilt the gimbal more than a few degrees, which isn't enough to get this scene properly framed. However, by going with a vertical panorama in horizontal mode, you do increase the megapixels a bit from the 12 that the telephoto lens comes with, and this photo is definitely going to be one of my favorites of the year. I also captured this angled version, which is one I also really like. If it wasn't for the previous one, this one would also be one of my favorite photos of 2025, which it obviously still is, but I do consider the other one to be a tiny bit better. But let me know down in the comments which one you prefer. For the other two photos, I made a combination of a long exposure and fast exposure to get the best of both worlds. That's one of several techniques I cover in my new 6 hours and 19 videos course, Mastering Waterfall Photography, where I take you out into the field, show you exactly how I photograph different waterfalls, why I use what settings, how I compose the scene, how I curate the many photos, and of course how and why I edit them like I do. You can get it along with my ebooks and dedicated post-processing course on landscape photography down in the description of the video. We visited several other locations on this trip, hotspot areas with beautiful colors and warm mud, different viewpoints around Lake Mývatn and a river, more locations that I can show here if the video should not be too long. And on our way back to Reykjavik, we visited this waterfall and canyon, which was a pleasant reacquaintance. It was one of those moody and damp afternoons, not helped by the fact that some of us obviously decided to head down right in front of the waterfall where we got drenched in spray. But it is usually worth it, and so it was with this waterfall too. Once we have got the shot, we headed up on top of the waterfall and focused on the smaller and intimate scenes with the rushing water and some autumn leaves. The last location we visited on this tour was the iconic sea stack Hvitserkur, and let me just be honest, the weather was dreadful for photography. Too much wind for reflections, boring overcast skies and flat light. So what do? You put a 10-stop filter on the lens and 2-minute long expose the heck out of the scene and capture some ethereal mood. But the morning wasn't over just yet. Jeroen had spotted some whales out in the fjord, so those of us with a drone could fly out and get some photos. It turned out it was bottlenose whales, which are quite rare in Iceland. According to Jeroen, there has been sightings of several bottlenose whales over the summer in Iceland, but they are quite rare here. It was a fantastic experience filming and photographing this healthy pod of whales. There seems to have been 2 young ones and maybe 3 or 4 adults. A fantastic end to this trip to Western and Northern Iceland. Be sure to get my 2026 calendar and my educational material if you want to learn much more via the links down in the description of the video. I hope you enjoyed these 2 adventurous landscape photography videos. See you next time.